My name is Dave Kranich. I'm Operations Manager with Northern Utility Services. The title of my presentation for today is Back from the Brink, Funding and Rehabilitating a Struggling Utility. And this is a tale about a utility that we became involved in about 6 years ago, which was the McGann utility down in Nikiski, and has become the Nikiski Bay utility. So, my purpose for this presentation is kind of twofold. Number one, a cautionary tale, because there's a lot of things done in this utility that, everything you do every action has a reaction. And everything that they did in this utility had a reaction and ended up costing a lot of money, a lot of time, and their personal reputation as well. And secondly, I think that the story of this utility is a model for rehabilitating a failed utility. It's certainly not the only model, and I couldn't guarantee that your system could do what we did with Nikiski Bay, but there's resources there that I'm going to talk about that you might find interesting, might be applicable to your system, and just while we're on here. So if there's something that I bring up, please come talk to me. We've got some brochures back in the back there that tell about some of the things that we do as a company, and so if we come across and I talk about something that intrigues you a little bit, come talk to me. We'd certainly be willing to share whatever we can with you. So historical perspective. I need to tell the story about this place. The utility began in 1965 to serve the homestead and trailer court developed by Mac McGann down in kind of the central Nikiski. Nikiski covers a big area, what people call Nikiski, but it kind of started off in the area right there by the OSK dock, and there's a mall that they developed there, and it's kind of downtown central for Nikiski. Through the 70s and 80s, the utility grew kind of organically, a little here, a little there, to serve the development efforts of the McGann family. The independent, end-of-the-road, North Kenai mindset was alive and well in those days, as I think it still is today, but it dictated a get-her-done type attitude to design and construction that used whatever was handy and for system materials, and not a lot of worry about regulators or DEC or engineers or design or any of that kind of stuff, That's for those guys who don't know how to get things done, So in our work with the system, we found all kinds of things. We found oil field valves buried, and we found pieces of drill pipe used for water pipe, and all kinds of things. So they drilled 2 wells, actually 3 wells. One ended up being abandoned, and buried a 10,000-gallon storage tank, and a booster system was installed in the late 60s to support the rapid industrial and residential growth in that boom town in Nikiski. Back in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot going on there. There was, I don't know, Mogi, maybe I don't know how long you were down there, but I think there was a pretty good sizable population there. And you walk around through the bushes around there, and there's evidence of trailers being stashed here and there and everywhere, and little septic systems and that kind of thing. So there was a lot of transient population there that needed a water system. So the utility rates were set at $12 a month with the first utility tariff, which was filed in 1970. And I can't believe that, knowing the players, that they probably weren't kind of twisted, their arm wasn't twisted into filing that with the regulatory commission. Somebody probably caught up with them and made them file that. So, but then the utility rates remained unchanged until 2007, when the whole thing kind of fell apart and change was forced. So you can imagine how the curve looked as far as utility maintenance over those years. As the rates stay the same and costs multiply. So then in 1989, PCE and tetrachloroethylene were discovered in the wells at 20 times the MCL. So that made national news. And the poor guy who owned the system was drugged right through the press and blamed, and it was a bad deal. And at least that's the story that I hear from the family when they recount the story for me. And the source of that contamination was, at the time, some test wells were drilled, and of course the state got involved, and I believe the state hired an independent contractor to do an assessment of it, and they determined that they felt like the most plausible cause of it was a dry cleaning facility that was across the street. Well, getting involved with it now, boy, you talk to the folks there in the Kiski, and nobody believes that story. There's stories of people dumping fire extinguishers over the bank from the fire hall, which is just the next lot up the hill. And old fire extinguishers used to have PCE in them, and the guys swore up and down that they went out there and they emptied those things out before they threw the canisters away. And then in recent time now, there's another site that has come to light that all kinds of PCE was dumped in. And that's about 3,000 or 4,000 feet away. So where it came from, who knows? But the poor guy who ran the dry cleaning was run out of town on a rail and I think prosecuted and died in poverty was kind of the story that I heard. So then in 1993, a state grant was obtained and a granular activated carbon treatment facility was constructed. So pretty nice construction, and I was just talking to James Weiss about that. It was probably it was designed by DEC, and DEC got right in there and helped them out with that. Then in 1993, probably not much connection, but Mac McGann died, and his family continued on with the system operation without DEC approval still, and or operator certification or the required testing. Their testing history was, I think they wrote this new list. So, but that was just the mindset. Is that it was kind of they found it kind of difficult to comply with all that stuff. And of course, in 1993, the rules weren't nearly as strict as they are today. So they've been doing it for a long time. Wanted to stay the way it had been. So. Then in 2002, routine VOC testing began to show that the GAC filters were breaking through with tetrachloroethylene, and DEC required an action plan to dispose of the activated carbon. Now, an interesting thing was that there were 4,000-gallon vessels, pressure vessels that were installed filled with granular activated carbon. No backwashing. It was a straight absorptive process. And those vessels, and it started off with 20 parts per million VOC coming in, and those vessels held for since 1993 all the way up to 2002. 20 years, but. So, and the original design had expected that perhaps that might have to be replaced every 6 months. And of course, the cost and expense of disposing of that, of removing that and replacing it with new media, is pretty steep. So anyways, DEC required an action plan to dispose of that activated carbon. And so then in 2003, they got some quotes to dispose of that, and in 2003 they filed a rate increase with the RCA. But that application was denied as incomplete. And I don't know how many of you have worked with the RCA, but they have a very definitive method that you must use to prepare a rate analysis and rate case. And if you don't do it the way they need it to do, they bounce it back to you, and they'll give you some help, but there is no way that you're going to go in there with a shoebox full of records or a statement and get a rate increase. And they will help you work through the process, but if you're not willing to work through the process, and probably hire somebody, if you're not up on that kind of thing, and probably hire somebody to help you, they're not going to allow you, no matter whether you come in there and clearly your $12 a month rate is not enough. Everybody can accept that, but if you cannot support the rate that you want to charge, they are bound by state regulation not to allow you to change the rates. So a lot of people don't understand that it isn't that they don't want to help you. They're bound by state regulation to require you to support your rates in a certain fashion according to certain rules. So didn't get a rate increase. So 2005, of course, the family members, the sons of Mac McGann and the daughters were working to make this thing happen every day. Of course, none of them were getting paid to do any of the repairs, and the repairs were increasing as the system was aging. And so they weren't getting paid for it. They got other things to do. Repairs aren't getting done on a regular basis. You know, they're lucky to get the bills out. And then before you know it, it's all on Grandma McGann's. And she's 80 years old, having a hard time keeping this stuff going, getting Connor and the grandkids into going out and fixing things, taking the samples. So you can imagine how this is winding down. So 2005, they entered the COBC, compliance order by consent, with DEC to address the carbon replacement corrosion control. It had years and years of high corrosive water there. Most of the places that had copper piping had to replace their copper piping because the water was corrosive. And they had not done anything to try and correct that. And then to return to regulatory compliance. But no significant progress had been made to correct those issues. So in 2006, Representative Mike Chenault, Peninsula Borough Mayor, and his Chief of Staff, Tim Navarre, and the RCA began to explore options to force a resolution of the compliance issues. Of course, by this time, nobody could sell the property, and people were having to drill wells. And the history that I didn't tell you was that that area has real high iron, manganese, and sulfur, and nasty water. And the McGanns were able to find a place where they got really good water, very little iron, almost no manganese, and really good quality water. But it's a little on the corrosive side. So and they had a good source there, a good quantity too. 1,000 gallons a minute, they tested it. So the folks in the developments that the McGanns had built were having to drill their own wells into nasty water to be able to sell their homes, and so with that kind of situation, it ends up becoming a political problem, and so. With some help of the politicians, they got things moving. So then the question is, what do you do? The RCA, the borough, and DEC decided the best course of action is to create a member-owned utility and then force a transfer. Now this has been 6 years ago, and to be honest, I was sitting down trying to remember exactly the chain of events and how this all transpired, and it's begun to get a little bit foggy for me, but the general idea was that everybody recognized that the McGanns were no longer fit, willing, or able to use the RCA capacity assessment term. Willing, fit, or able. So But then the question was, who will manage the transition to the new utility? And that's where we came into the picture. Actually, a little bit before that, facing fines and that kind of thing, the McGanns had approached us to buy their utility or buy it for $1 maybe even. And after reviewing it, we decided, boy, you know, we have bought ourselves a job before, but this would not be a good one. So anyway, so we declined to do that, but somehow our name kind of got in the mix there, and the RCA requested us to consider taking on operation and management of the McGann system, and to at least help them get an idea as to what needed to happen to bring this thing back. So Northern Utility Services accepts that challenge and schedules a site visit. So here's what we found. This is the treatment facility and the well house here. It doesn't look too bad on the outside. This area here that's the gas concrete, that's the original well house. There's a well inside of it, and there's some booster pumps in there. And back into this hillside is a 10,000 gallon storage tank that was buried. And then this metal building over here is the addition that was made by DEC that houses the treatment facility, the granular activated carbon. And then this whole site is kind of down in a little hollow up on a hill. Let's see where up behind here is a fire station and for highway. And this whole hillside, it appears, was really filled. When we got there, we could see stuff poking out of this hillside, like barrels and rear ends out of pickup trucks and all kinds of stuff. And the barrels were kind of, we were like, whoa, what's in those barrels, you know? And then there was a pit just off to the left out here. There's a big pit that's about 15 feet deep that looked like people have been throwing junk in and gradually over time filling in. So, well, what in the world is buried in that, you know? So that gave us a little bit of pause there. This is the inside of that concrete building. Haven't seen much in the way of maintenance in many years. These PRBs here were non-functional. There was 3 of them in there, and the system was set up to regulate pressure to the system with PRBs. This actually facility, I believe, was designed by an engineer, but it strayed far from the original plan by the time we got involved there. And I think Hoagie went into this site and kind of have a picture that I think he took here. So then there's some booster pumps, a couple booster pumps in here. When we got involved there, one of those booster pumps was running. One of those booster pumps was running 24/7 because the controls had all done belly up. And in the hand position, right? And the other pump was dead. And there was the carcass of another pump laying there. And the benefit of these, it was a good thing that the system had lots of leaks, but the booster pumps actually couldn't make any more than 8 pounds of pressure, so they were just running deadhead there the whole time. And one of the 2 wells was belly up as well, so it was only running on one well, no backup. So then, as we wandered around the system a little more, we found this old well house here, open out behind the building. And it happens, it's kind of hard to see in that picture, but it's about 8 feet deep. And as we went down inside there to kind of poke around and figure out what was going on, there were some pipes that coming in there. We found a dead rabbit that had fallen in that thing. We kind of wondered if we were going to find somebody else in there, but because this ladder was almost completely rotted out. So, and then as we got more involved in the system, we discovered another 5 sites kind of like this that were some kind of wall that wasn't protected from being fall in. So, So this is one of those booster pumps. This picture was taken by Moby, I think. You can see the fine support system we had here to hold that thing up. Some rotten blocks and cement blocks there, and so sanitary surveyor with run out of paper in here. And there's the other booster pump that's dead. And so anyway, then here's the treatment. That was definitely a nice facility, done right, and color-coded pipes and everything. So, and one of the things that was quite cool was they had seen far enough ahead to when the original contract was done to put in some granular activated carbon. They had about half enough there to replace what was in the vessel. And you see, I got more hair there. The next slide will show you why I lost it. This is a distribution map. And this is the only thing that they could give me for 5 miles over the distribution line. And so you'll see that it's color-coded for different types of materials. And so as we got involved in the system, we kind of discovered that actually this wasn't even accurate, in that there's lines that exist that are not on this line, on this map, and some of the stuff that's on this map doesn't exist, or is in a different place than what is shown on the map. So, anyways, over that area, there was a lot of secrets to discover as we got into the distribution system. So, our big question here as we got involved in this, well, can we do this? The liability exposure with contaminated GHC, well, we've never been through that at all. We didn't have any experience with that. And everybody we talked to says, well, if you screw that up, you could be held liable for that. And so, and then the liability exposure with the potential site contamination. Well, I had no idea it was buried on that site, and if we went and got poking around there and broke open a container of whatever, would we be liable? So, and then of course the big question is, how in the world do we get paid for this? So, we got some good legal counsel and spent a little bit of money on that, and discovered that there was a way that we could get some assurance, at least from the state, that they wouldn't be coming after us if we went in there in good faith and did our best to not disturb anything and to do it right. So we went ahead and agreed to get involved here. And so, but the silver question is how do we get paid? Because, and that's the kind of the key where I think a lot of small systems are, is the system gets so far in the hole. How do you bring somebody in that is qualified to fix it when the system doesn't have any money, that can't change its rates because the RCA won't help, and then the amount of investment that's needed is way beyond what the ratepayer is going to be able to pay at that point in the near term anyways. So how in the world do you get from this failed state or near failed state to a place where you can begin to fix things? Because nobody's going to do this stuff for nothing, or take on the liability even of getting involved. So Representative Mike Schnall, being the consummate politician that he is, and understanding how this stuff works, suggested that we apply for a designated legislative grant, which is part of the capital budget every year, and we put together our best estimate for a budget to work through the initial issues of $150,000. And that was to transition the utility from the McGann's to the Kishka Bay Utilities, which was a newly formed member-owned utility, a non-profit member-owned utility. included in that budget was an environmental assessment of the well site. We needed to know what we were dealing with there, whether there was just empty barrels, junk sticking out of the hillside, or whether there was actually contamination on the site. We needed recreation of customer accounts and asset schedules. The customer accounts, they hadn't been billing anybody in 2 years, and the account records that we were handed were lowly and very incomplete. And so some people hadn't been billed in many years because it's never gotten caught up. And there were no asset schedules for, the pieces were in different places within some of the records that we found, but as far as going to the regulatory commission and supporting your rate, you have to have, what are your assets? What's your book value? All that kind of thing. So that had to be reconstructed. There was a fair amount of legal services. One of the movers and shakers of this transfer was a law firm down in Kenai that was willing to. They were told by the politicians that, well, you get involved, we'll make sure you get taken care of. And so they spent a lot of effort working behind the scenes to try and make this all happen at their regular rate. And so by the time even this, by February of 2007, they racked up a significant bill for this whole project. Then, also in that $150,000 was well house rehab work and monitoring system that we could see needed. Obviously, we couldn't just be running on one booster pump, running on hand with it. So that other well needed to be upgraded. So then of course, there's operation and management fees until the rates could be established. That needed to be in there too. So it ended up actually being a pretty lean budget, really, when all things were considered. So then in June 2007, the Kitchen Bay Utility was incorporated, and a board was selected from the members, the customers that were being served. And then in November, the RCA approved transfer certificate of necessity to Kitchen Bay Utilities as a full certificated, economically regulated utility. Now, I don't know whether anybody's up much on the RCA regulations, but there's two classes of utilities, small utilities in Alaska. One is provisionally certificated, and the other one is fully economically regulated. And the provisional certification allows a small utility to be able to raise their rates without having to go through all that big process. It's quite attractive to a homeowner association or a small utility. You have to report what your rates are. You change your tariff, you just have to report to the RCA what you did. And that's all real attractive until you decide you want to get some money. And then nobody will talk to you because you're not economically regulated. And the sources of money, even, I think, I can't say for certain about the legislative grant process, but you don't have the level of credibility because the reporting requirements are so minimal with that provisional certification. You don't have the credibility that you need to be able to convince somebody that you know how to spend that money in a long manner. So the initial residential rates were then set at that transfer at $35 a month, based on the idea that, well, it's a relatively competitive rate with some of the other utilities around. It's probably not enough, but we didn't want to have too much rate shock. The community that's served by the main subdivision that's served by this utility is pretty low-end customers. A lot of trailers, mobile homes. You go through there, you see a lot of piston over the roof and styrofoam in the windows and that kind of thing. So those people are maybe by their own choice, but they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. So then in July and August, when the money became available, and we start to go, okay, we need to pay the law firm, we need to pay all the people that have put money into time and money into this deal. We discovered that legislative grant fund is not retroactive before the time it was signed by the government. So, by that time, an environmental study had been done at the well house site, and the lawyers put a lot of time and effort into it, and we were sitting there wondering how in the world we were going to pay for that. So the cautionaries: don't spend money before don't spend the grant before it's been approved. Make sure that I think it was one of those things that Representative Chenault had been involved in that for signed off a lot of those grant requests, but he never heard back as to what the requirements are on it, and so nobody really knew about that. Anyway, so then we were able to apply to the municipal grants and loans for a drinking water fund loan for $65,000 to cover those expenses. And the drinking water fund can be retroactive. So, another piece of information for y'all is the funding through the drinking water fund, revolving loan monies, can be retroactive. And in some ways it's more restrictive, but it's also more liberal, at least in that piece. So, our work begins on the system. The condition that we came into that system with, there's been no billings in over 2 years, out of date, and incomplete customer records, no asset schedules. We were leaking about 300% of normal system demand. Over the years, we've come back down to about 22,000 gallons a day if we don't have big commercial users. And we were bumping around 100,000 there, a little over. Some parts of the system we had less than 220 psi in about 30% of the system. And I kind of remember that day because there's a place in the system that's pretty high, and this old lady was saying, sometimes when I shower, I hear this sucking noise. and then it stops, and then I get water, and then it comes back on. And then I go to the next couple doors down, and this guy says, man, the pressure's terrible here, and so I installed a booster pump. So every time his booster pump was coming on, he was sucking a vacuum on her house. And then the water lines are running down the back lot lines here. They don't go down the street, which, each method has its benefits. But in this case, all the old cribs are out the back. And, I'm walking around behind the place where, the lady's talking about the sucking sound in the shower, and here's this hole back there about 5 feet from where I know the water line is. And, of course, we know that the water line is leaking, they're galvanized. And, wow, and I think all the back tees have probably been taken into the well house at that point in time, so nobody had a clue as to what was going on in the distribution system. So that day, I think, or the next day, we got a chlorine pump. We started injecting chlorine immediately there, and caught up with EDC later. Sorry about that, James. So then about 3 of the 150 key boxes were functional, and the way they had decided, I must say that old man McGann must have thought it was a good idea because he was consistent. All their key boxes were regular curb stop, a regular utility grade curb stop, most of them were, but then Orangeburg pipe coming up to the surface, and almost none of there were only a few of them that had a cap on it. But of course, over the years, over 50 years, how are you going to find an old Orangeburg pipe? There's, metal detectors, there's no way to find them. So of course the kids filled up with rocks, all that kind of thing. So there was, of all those 150 key boxes, I think there was 3, I don't know, Matt You might remember a few more. I can remember 3 in particular that were a newer grade.
I'm trying to forget.
So, and then there were virtually non-existent accessible system valves. Now, they had installed valves, but they were the gate valve types with the handle. But unless you got an 8-foot arm, that doesn't help you much if that Orangeburg pipe is still accessible. So, and of course those things, I don't know, those of the operators that have been around much, you leave them in an open state for very long, for years on end, and when you go to close them, they won't close just because they're rotted off inside. So they were non-functional. Then, of course, we had 18 cubic yards of contaminated GAC that needed disposal. We had 5 open vaults posing fall and entrapment hazards. Of course, we had that extreme cross-connection hazard with the negative pressure. And then we had the severe copper corrosion issues that, actually, by that point in time, there was very few places had any copper left. They had removed all their copper because of these. But what was interesting, there was one house that was one of the oldest places in the whole place, and he had probably $10,000 worth of copper in his house with the big stuff, he had copper sewer and distribution water in his place, and he had never had a leak. So I think the quality of copper has gone down over the years. Anyways, so we put on the full court press to bring this, get going with things here. So the Job Corps program out in the valley has operator training, and they have students that you can employ for, they need work-based experience. So we didn't have to pay them, but we did a little bit, but they were happy to come out and help us with getting some of these things taken care of. So we sent the cute ones out to survey each customer and talk to each system owner and explain to them that there's a new utility. We're not dealing with McGann's anymore. We've got a new utility. It's a member-owned utility. You're an owner, but you're going to have to pay. And we need you to give us your billing information. So. And then we immediately began sodium fluoride injection. And then we immediately began to rehabilitate the booster pumping system to provide that compression. Seems how there was plenty of water in the source there, it was a lot easier to pump more of it and deal with the leaks later. So we got the booster pump system back up and functioning. Installed we repaired one of the pumps and then installed another one that was on VFD, and got the other well back up and working, and installed some pressure tanks so that when the pump cycled, they didn't hammer things. So we located and stopped some of the obvious leaks, and those when we did our initial survey of the system, it seems how most of the lots have been set up for mobile homes. There we found 4 or 5 different just gushers out there that we turned off. So that reduced our usage by about 20,000 gallons a day, just locating those. So we got a new booster pump plumbed in here to be able to give us a little bit of backup. And of course we had to maintain service to everybody during this, so we have a little bit of a deal to be able to state this, to get all the junk out of here, and stepwise maintain system pressure. So there's the pressure tanks that were installed inside to take care of the service. So then stage 2 of our first year's effort there, we had to do a full line survey and GIS mapping of the distribution system, so we knew where everything's at. At least had some kind of an idea. Of course, I don't know how many of you have done line locating. You don't just because you're tracing something doesn't necessarily mean that it's water. So we did. It took us a while to find, and then then with the galvanized is not traceable well sometimes. The corroded joint will not pass through it very well. And so we definitely had some issues with verification that over the next few years we ended up finding out what we didn't know. Required a complete tariff rewrite, just because the original tariff, although I guess the RCA must have been more lenient back then when they approved the original tariff, because they had a separate rate for bakeries and a separate rate for dog washers and a separate rate for restaurants per seat and all kinds of different things. And how in the world are you supposed to support those different rate structures with real numbers? So we had to do a complete tariff rewrite. And we had experience with those kind of things before with some of the other utilities we operate, so it wasn't a new thing for us. We had to remove and replace the spent granular activated carbon. That's kind of a story in and of itself that I'll probably leave out here. But
what do you do with it?
Suffice it to say that the regulation, that the EPA regulation, can be kind of read two different ways. And we went into it with the understanding that we were going to have to ship it out of state to a approved landfill site, but didn't know how to do that, and I didn't necessarily want to just out of the box hire somebody to handle that stuff cradle to grave for us. So, being a good system manager, I called the EPA and I said, well, so what do I do with this stuff? And so, well, tell me about it. It's groundwater treatment for TCE, PCE in it. We've done some samples on it, and it doesn't leach anything out of it. It's all, that stuff's completely captured in there. And the EPA guy said, well, this is good news. You can put it in the landfill. And so, well, that wasn't the answer that we were looking for, but we'll take that one. And but then we got tooled up to go take the stuff out. We got some more order to put back in and all that, and then Dad and I were talking about this. You know, we probably ought to get something right, just for good measure. So I called the lady up here in Alaska and asked her the same question: Is this okay to put this in the landfill? Well, yep, that's just fine. Well, so we back to put that in writing. Sure, do that. Well, waiting for a couple of days. And we'd already scheduled to go down there and take the stuff out. And so we en route down there to take it out. She said that she was going to get me out on Tuesday, and so Tuesday comes, and the way the thing worked is we had just taken the stuff out. And of course, you generate waste the minute you take it out of the vessel, according to the rules. We had just taken the stuff out of the vessels. The time that I got a call from her that, you know what? Change her mind. That's contaminated. That's hazardous waste now. And so, regardless of the fact that everybody's been drinking water that's been going through it, it's hazardous waste. So anyways, that threw a big monkey wrench in our program there, and being uninitiated, I think we maybe unwisely chose to try and fight it a little bit because it didn't make any sense. And so we ended up taking a fair amount more time and some lawyer money and what have you to discover that we didn't have that rope was not going to push. So then cleaning, inspection, storage tank, mainline valve replacement, installation, leak detection survey, major leak repair, reduced the system demand by about 50% that first summer. And then we contracted the DHI engineers to prepare system analysis and master plan for the system. And that included pressure zones and analyzing the pressures of the system. Then in 2008, we applied for $420,000, another legislative grant for major distribution system rehabilitation, media disposal. We had to, by that point in time, we didn't have money. We had, because we were told that we could put it in the landfill, we didn't budget, we didn't set aside money to send it down south, so we had to send stuff down south. And actually, that was a little bit of a difficulty. Once you generate that, you only have 90 days to store it on site, but we didn't have any money to ship it outside, so that was a difficult issue for a little while. And that was approved in 2009, and in that, with those funds, we went through, we renewed 95 of the key boxes, and of course that was an issue with trying to maintain full collections unless you can turn people's water off. It's pretty difficult to maintain that. So installed 15 system valves, so then we could work on one section at a time. And then installed blowouts at the dead-end lines to be able to flush the system. We performed a cost of service study, filed a new rate case with the RCA, raising rates approximately 26% to 47.30 for residential, and then there's commercial rates that went up from there. And we disposed of the GIC in the lower 48. Here's a picture of one of those oil-filled valves in there. Galvanized pipe. The piping, actually, the galvanized pipe is actually in fairly decent shape, except for where it gets close to brass. And then it starts to erode. But after 50 years, it's not too bad. So here's just an example of each one of those. We made notes and pictures as to what we have there. And bonded across the rubber connections and such so we can still trace the lines. Then blow off here. It's all embedded on there. And then in 2009, the American Reinvestment and Recovery put money into the drinking water fund, revolving loan funds. And we applied for money through that program, $2 million with, and because it was a green project, we were able to get 100% principal forgiveness. So a loan with principal forgiveness. In other terms, it'd be a grant, but it's a loan here. So that was through the last drinking water fund. And that was, the purpose of that was to complete the key box renewal and design and construct a reservoir facility and a transmission main, Hogan's transmission main and boosting facility. From the well house area, there was a 6-inch steel transmission main that had been installed originally. And it ran right underneath the side of the fire hall. And so it wasn't something you could dig up and fix, and we did some leak correlation on it and discovered that it was indeed leaking. And so part of that project was to bypass that and put the transmission main out right away, the street right away where it belongs. And it's all HDPE 12-inch facility. So and then pumping efficiency gains, replacement of leaking mains, allowed classification as a green project to qualify for 100% forgiveness. So here's the transmission main, and we had a little bit of, on the right there, connecting into the system. We had to do a little bit of magic there to make it all work, keep everybody in water. And then the reservoir facility was unique in that the system, the way it was originally designed, pumped the water out of the ground through the radioactive carbon filters at 15 psi or so, and into a 10,000 gallon storage tank. And then booster pumps made the system pressure out of that, not unlike a lot of systems around. Well, to get that green money, you had to be able to prove an efficiency gain of 20% in your pumping. I don't know how many of you guys deal with high efficiency pumps and that kind of thing much, but gaining 20% is, I don't know, Don Young was talking about young guys that don't know much, but I think that was one that must have been come up by one of those young guys, because gaining 20% in efficiency is just pretty hard to do, because a pump is a pump is a pump. And a high efficiency motor, you're good to gain 5% or 7% over a normal motor. So how in the world can you get 20%? Well, we got to looking at it and realized that if we only pump that water once, then we would save about 30%. So, seeing how money was not an object, if it was 100% principal forgiveness, to a certain degree. I mean, we are considered about the same money, but we could see that by using two pressure vessels, 35,000 gallons each, for a total of 60, we can pressurize that water in those tanks with about a couple feet of air headspace. Another picture, the next picture here shows, maybe I don't they're tilted about 2 feet towards the back. So that allows a smaller headspace for air in that gap. So the majority of the volume of it can be held with water.
Then you use
yeah, and then also when it comes down to being close to empty, you can use there's more usable water. So these run at just like a regular hydromatic tank. They were manufactured down in North Carolina and shipped up here. I don't know who buys out of the USA Blue Book, but pictures of these tanks are in the USA Blue Book. So the facility was built, and it actually looks pretty good. The way it was set up was that the well pumps would pump through the treatment system. Treatment vessels were rated for 100 psi, so we were good there. And at system pressure, and maintain pressure in these tanks. And then for fire flow, or if the well's quick, or that kind of situation, then booster pumps would, as pressure dropped from those tanks, then booster pumps would kick in and it'd act just like an atmospheric pressure. So you got 2.5, 3 days worth of water in those tanks under that atmospheric type if the well goes down or the source has. So inside that facility here we have our 100 horse fire pump, booster pump for fire flow. And to get the best efficiency, we installed a line shaft turbine on the primary well pump. So, and then installed a standby generator in that facility, and so they are good to go. And the facility really works great. We've got a monitoring system there that I can dial up on my phone and see what's going on there, and do some resets. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the mission system, but it's a low-end SCADA system that is pretty useful for small systems where you're not trying to track a whole host of inputs and outputs. And we have the SCADA 3000 there for tracking. There's more digital inputs than the mission system would handle, and I just needed an alarm off of that, so we're using that as opposed to doing a full bore SCADA type approach there. So the Kishka Bay utilities today. The average system usage, we're not selling bulk water or commercial. There's a cannery there, a fish processing plant. 22,000 gallons per day instead of 105. We got all there. We're in compliance with regulations, including lead and copper rule. We've installed corrosion control there, and just this last year we got our copper down below the MCF. We've got a minimum pressure of 45 psi in the system. We've got 1,000 gallons per minute plus fire flow with one central hydrant, and of course the master plant divisions replacing some of the lines install normal hydrants.
What do you use for corrosion control?
Disodium phosphate. It seems to work. We've got the Kenai Peninsula Borough built a new fire hall there, and they didn't think to not put copper in it. And the fire hall has got corrosion issues. Brand new piping though, and so it's hard to know. But there's a lot of issues with that facility that kind of conspire against it, and there's not a lot of usage in some of the areas. So disodium phosphate doesn't work unless it runs through the pipes.
It's coming out.
Yeah. So and pH control, we kind of looked into that. pH control through soda ash would require thousands of pounds. And just prohibitively expensive for us, so that's what we did there. We have 2.5 days worth of storage. We have standby power generation. We have a fully documented distribution system now. We've been developing the local bulk water sales. Part of that new facility is we have a keypad outside that somebody, the contractor wants bulk water, they can apply the utility for bulk water sales, and they can access and turn on a valve inside with their special key code. And we've got a backflow preventer and everything inside this frost protection. So the system is protected from them, and they're able to sell bulk water. We've got a rehabilitated GAC treatment system. An interesting thing about that contamination is that there's a benefit in having a leaky system, and we pump so much water that we basically flush the stuff out of the ground. And so the raw water contamination now is below the MCL. So that GAC is technically not required, but we want to do it anyways. It seems how there's been so much going on in that area that it makes sense. Yeah.
I hate to ask a stupid question, but who's selling the water?
Who are we selling the water to? Oh, okay. There's about 100 customers.
Is that like maybe the platform?
Oh, you mean the bulk water? No, actually, OSK, the dock facility, they've got their own well, so they sell basically all the boats and stuff that come in, and they fill it up right there at the dock. But we, for a little bit, sold some to Bacon and Ice Road out the east end there. We've sold a couple 100,000 gallons this summer to a directional drilling outfit that was drilling a line out from the new HEA facility for an outfall line, and just all kinds of things. Yeah.
If any of the distribution system was underground, how did you do the GIS mapping?
Well, we went out with a GPS unit and located all the key boxes and all the system valves, and so we kind of came along afterwards, after we'd done a lot of the rehabilitation and mapped the stuff that we rehabilitated. It was close to the end of the majority of the distribution system. And then we've got full cost recovery rate structure with about 98% collection rates. Now we're having to file now for another rate increase. We discovered that the rate that we had just didn't quite envision. We still have maintenance issues. We've still got galvanized piping. There's still things that tend to break a little bit more than a brand new system. So, and we've had some frost freezing issues. A lot of those pipes were not very deep enough to really be prevented from freezing. And so with the leakage, they didn't freeze, but now that it doesn't leak anymore, we've had some frost problems. So we've had to do some thawing in the middle of winter, and that gets expensive quick. So have been working on that. We insulated good portions of the shallower sections and have installed some places to be able to get in and steam thaw inside. Yes.
Since you rehabilitated an old system and maybe added on to it, did the old system have curb stops for every customer?
The old system had curb stops for most customers.
So how do you get a 98% collection rate when you have a system that wasn't designed with any curb stops or to cut it off?
That's a good question. And that's where I was kind of going with my conclusion here. You know, had standard utility practices been used from the very beginning here, even using galvanized lines and knowing that they're only going to last a few years, the cost to rehabilitate that system would have been probably half what we ended up spending on it. And it would have been done largely as a part of routine maintenance because there would have been money to fix things and to do routine leak detection, fix them when you find them, and rehabilitate as you go. Probably some loans in there to replace some sections. Part of the reason why we didn't go in and replace just carte blanche replace the lines was a good portion of the lines are not really dedicated necessarily right of ways. And we had been wanting to tackle that one. That was part of it. And the other thing is the amount of money that we needed to be able to, we needed to get the whole system up to where we could turn people off, stop the leaks, all that kind of thing. We didn't want to get bogged down in replacing lines before we had the whole thing to stabilize.
And that galvanized water line is still in good shape.
Yeah, and a lot of that galvanized line is still in pretty good shape. It just goes away where it meets up with the brass. So, and then had cooperation with regulation. That would have prevented the forced transfer of the certificate. And then effective management and rate making would have resulted in reserves and sound financial health. If they had been charging reasonable rates all the way along, they would have been, especially in the early years of the utility, they would have been putting away money and would have had money to be able to invest in it in a feasible financial position. So, I suggest you not get there. So, as a not necessarily we've got, so all you guys know we have plenty to do at this point, but we do have some expertise in some of these things. We know that a lot of small systems really struggle with trying to solve some of these things that tend to be kind of feel insurmountable, at least, if not actually be insurmountable. And so we'd like to help you keep your hair if possible. Donated money.
Moral of the story, don't give up.
That's right. So any other questions? All right, well thank you for your